Despite years of advocacy and incremental gains of women's political participation, Nigeria remains one of the lowest ranked country in the world for female representation in elective offices. Proposals to reserve seats for women in national and subnational levels have resurfaced as a bold reform idea aimed at correcting systemic imbalance and give women a stronger voice in governance. Supporters argue that reserve seats are a necessary corrective measure in a patriarchal system where structural, financial, and cultural barriers continue to limit women's participation and ambition. Critics, however, question the effectiveness and fairness of such quota, raising concerns about tokenism, merit, and political manipulation. Tonight, on this episode of Election Reform Half Hour, we'll be exploring the merits, challenges, and future of institutionalizing reserve seats for women in Nigeria. Democratic process, what lessons can be drawn from countries that have already adopted similar measures and affirmative action through reserve seats, accelerated gender inclusion, or there deeper structural reform that is required? I am Nigerian. Welcome to Electoral Reform Half Hour on NTA News, Abuja. This program is brought to you by Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa with support from MacArthur Foundation. Our guest tonight is Brenda Anugwom, Chief Executive Officer of Nigerian Women Trust Fund, NWTF. She is experienced professional in international development with a strong background in social development, governance, and indeed human rights. Brenda has over 2 decades of experience working on issues related to gender equality, legal reforms, and public procurement. She has served in several roles, which includes legal advisor to the Renaissance program was in South Africa, and procurement legal experts for the Nigerian Governors Forum. She holds an LLM in Rule of Law for Development from Loyola University, Chicago, and the degrees committed. She's committed to advancing women's participation in governance and addressing systemic exclusion through institutional reforms. I want to welcome you, Brenda, to this evening's program.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for braving the Saturday rains. It's dark, rainy Saturday in Abuja.
I know. Thank you so much for having me.
So, the Honorable Adebayo, who is pushing these reserve seats, is actually thinking about 37 more seats. If you add that to a 390-member House of Representatives, for instance, and that is 1 per state, what significant, what significant impact do you think that will have?
Thank you so much for the question. Yes, adding 37 more seats to the House of Representatives and also the Senate, and adding an additional 108 in state houses of assembly. That will require, of course, the alteration of the Constitution, sections 48, 49, and 91. So this is what we have been waiting for. This is what we've been calling for as women-led organizations. We have been pushing for this sort of reforms because what we have now, 360 members of the House of Representatives, and you have more than 90% male. So when issues relating to women are before them, they are the ones that have to vote. They are the ones that have to make decisions. And that's not right. And we're looking at a country where our census says that we are almost 50-50. So if we're talking about equitable representation, Nigeria is nowhere near that. So it is important that everybody pays attention this time around, and we hope that we have all the support from everyone to ensure that this bill is passed and gets signed into law.
So this policy is a quick fix. It doesn't appear to me to be the silver bullet that resolves the issue of lack of inclusion of women. So is there a timeline? Are there goals? How do we track eventually what will help us to expand or even take away the policy beyond just these quick fixes? Because I say this because the political parties have a role in ensuring that more women are brought into elected offices.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, first of all, definitely it's not going to cure the systemic exclusion that we have in our polity, but it will be a step towards helping women come out to run for offices. Because we have, there's so many offices that we need occupied, from the sub-national to the national. And all the time, you could have, like, let's say in the situation where you have 20 people, maybe 2 are women at the most. So what this is supposed to be is to encourage more women to start coming out. If you see more women like you sitting and deliberating at the National Assembly, passing laws, you will be somehow encouraged to come out and run for office. So it's supposed to encourage more women to run for office. And I wouldn't put a timeline to it, because we need to actually observe and see how it actually makes a difference in the society. If we have more women coming out as a result, then I think it's successful. If not, we need to continue until we have that change, until we have that shift, and more women are encouraged to come out and run for office.
Brenda, there's a risk element to this process. There is possibility of this being tokenistic, and then not just being tokenistic, but elite patronage, where money bags will capture the same and use it for their own benefits. How do you think we can address this risk?
Okay, so we are already running a system. People call it money politics. I don't know what anybody else would want to call it, but whatever kind of politics that we are running is the same politics the people who are going to contest for these special seats or reserved seats are still going to run. So if we call it whatever name we want to call it, let's know it's our system. That's what we have been practicing for a while. And I don't want people to look at it as a token, because they will still go through a process. The only difference is that political parties will have to field only women. So the same process that a man or any person will go through to get elected into the other seats, the regular seats, it's the same process they will go through. The difference here is that political parties will have no other choice but to field women. So whoever comes out and is voted in should go and sit there legitimately, because it's not a token. It wasn't given freely. They went through a process.
So if you've watched the trends, the the voting trends in the National Assembly. What political alliances or strategic, engagements do you think is necessary to get this bill passed, especially when you remember that just the previous gender bills didn't go through in the National Assembly? What are those things you think needs to happen to get this to sail?
Yeah, those gender bills. I think the fact that we tagged them gender bills, that was one strike against them. The term gender actually makes people fear. I have no idea why. Perhaps it's the masculine fear of being replaced, maybe. But this time around, we need those who wield power and influence to stand behind it. And we already have the president, the commitment from the Senate president. We have the deputy speaker the other day speaking about it. Let's have these principal officers standing tall, speaking for this bill. And they should be able to convince their constituents to support it. Once we have the social will, we have the political will, of course, within the National Assembly and other arms of government. Then once we have the social will as well, it becomes a movement that could match what we had when we had the Not Too Young to Run bill, that was passed. So that movement is what we need. But then we need these principal officers, these officers that wield a lot of influence within the polity to stand behind this bill. And once that is done, everybody will follow.
Yeah, but I think I heard the deputy speaker a few weeks ago talk about the projectization of this whole thing. And he's the one off camera we were talking about how this has become a project. And he was also lamenting that there's a need for this to really be a movement that can support even reluctant legislators to be able to, because once people see this as market, in quotes, then that becomes a disincentive. From the point of the Women Trust Fund and the kind of energy that you bring to this work, is there some way you are helping to build this movement that can support and borrow muscle to those principal officers that you're talking about who support what you're doing?
So, our main work is advocacy. So we engage with these legislators. And while in the course of engagement, we found out that there is actually support. There's support. I mean, I don't know what your discussion with him.
It's not camera. Discussion. I said I listened. No, with you when I was before we came on.
Okay, yeah, that. But we engage with them, and with these engagements through advocacy, we've been able to get from them that they support this bill. And we don't, of course, want a situation where this is turned into a project. It definitely wouldn't be if these critical stakeholders, these principal officers at the National Assembly move with it. They are talking about now.
They are saying now that they need to be a movement. They want this to be a movement.
Absolutely. I talked about social will here.
Yes.
So for there to be a movement, there has to be social goodwill. The people have to stand and support it the same way they supported the Not Too Young to Run bill. So yes, it still boils on those who wield a lot of influence. And I still leave it at the threshold of these principal officers who have already started the movement. I see it as a movement already. They've already started it. All we need to do is to open it up and move right down to the constituents, the grassroots. Once we have people following, that followership will be organic. It will take over any project anybody is doing.
So we'll be looking at how to, extend this to executive offices and party structures when we return. We'll be going on a break now. Electoral Reform Half Hour continues shortly. Stay with us. Glad to have you back. We're still speaking with Brenda Anugwom, Chief Executive Officer, Nigerian Women Trust Fund. So I was talking about how we could extend this, to, if you go to the political parties, they have the National Working Committee, they have the National Executive Council of the party. The National Working Committee is the decision making, the highest the decision making organ of the party. The National Executive also, and most of the time they zoned woman leader to, so you can have 11 to 13 members of the National Working Committee, and you have only one woman leader, or sometimes you have one vice in some parties. If there's a voting, you already. So this conversation, how much are we pushing it also to appointments and party positions as well?
So I'm going to bring in Senegal here. So Senegal has a gender parity law, and one of the provisions there compels political parties to have women in certain positions, compels political parties to field a certain number of women. So if we pass this legislation, there will be set provisions that will regulate the way these working committees within the parties should appoint women or field women for positions. For instance, the special seats or reserved seats that we're talking about, it will require them to field a woman. Whatever they want to zone it to anywhere, I think that should be an internal party mechanism. But the thing is that let there be a woman that is, fielded. So if we take a note from Senegal and have, in the legislation, these are the ways that women should be represented within the party, within committees, in the appointed. It's going to work out that way. In Senegal, there were political parties that refused to adhere to that. They were disqualified from contesting for elections. So there was already a penalty. And with that, a lot of the other ones, immediately, decided to obey and then and comply with the law. And then those ones were the ones that fielded people for offices. So we need to have that as part of this legislation. Otherwise, just like you said, there will always be one woman leader and every other person is a man, and of course she will have no voice.
So what do you think is the most misunderstood part of this push, for reserved seats? And how do you think this misunderstanding shape, resistance? So,
I mean, you mentioned tokenism. So I think a lot of people are seeing it as, oh, well, women will be given seats. No, we're not going to be given seats. We're just making this shift, this change, just to have more women sit at the table. And we want there to be a ripple effect. If they sit at the table, they should be able to encourage other women who are watching to see that their kind can come at the table, and that will make them want to run for office. So we want to correct that. Nobody is going to be giving anybody anything. When it comes to the reserved seats, the parties will be fielding only women, and they will compete for it. They'll go through that political process, electoral process, and the person who wins is elected. That's one. Then the second thing is when people feel, oh, there are already 360 in the House, and then 109 at the Senate, and then when you add more, there'll be, a lot of expenses. Absolutely. I mean, if you check it and you see the gains that a country will have,
can you run us through what?
Well, I mean, let's look at the Scandinavian countries. Let's look at countries. I mean, there are empirical results to show that of the countries that involve more women in governance move forward. I mean, there's also a UNDP report on that. I think a 1999 UNDP report on that as well. So if you look at others and see that once women are brought onto the table, then it makes development faster. It creates better jobs. I mean, I had a friend of mine who has passed now who mentioned women come with an expansionist agenda. They come and it expands. So if we have that, if you've seen that in other countries, why don't we try such here and see what it's going to do, especially now that we are really facing, hard times economically. So this is about the best time. So if we see what we're going to gain economically by having more women, I don't think spending a little much more to have more women at the table.
It's civil society that is the loudest about increased cost of governance.
Civil society represents the people.
No, we are the ones that are loudest about increased cost of governance and...
Okay, we are the loudest, and we're also the loudest saying, let's have more women, because we represent the people, and the office of the citizen is the most important. So
do you think that if the reserve seats bill is passed, it will change perception about, how especially the issue around cultural barriers and the rest of them?
So I don't think anything concerning culture can be changed magically or drastically by a legislation. However, it will encourage more women to want to run for office. It will encourage girls who are in school, younger women who are growing up, to see that if a woman can sit at the table, so can they. It may not have the effect right away, but the long-term effect is exactly what this country needs. And everybody will enjoy it, because we will now start seeing more women come out, sit down, and discuss. And when you have two doing, instead of one taking a decision, two taking a decision, it's usually better, because there's, more diverse perspective to any issue that is being discussed. So I think what we are going to gain will be much more than whatever it will take to have more women sit at the table.
I know earlier you were pointing us to countries, Scandinavia, and where reserved seats or more inclusion of women have worked out. As you share your final thoughts, Nigeria is multi-ethnic, multi-diverse. How do you think that increased women representation would, help us?
Okay, so the multi-ethnicity that Nigeria is known for me, is a huge advantage, because it means we have different perspectives we bring to the table. We have different views. We have, different cultures. It's a big advantage. And if we succeed in passing this bill, it's going to make, I think it's going to bring us closer together as, multicultural, multi-ethnic groups that we are in this country. It's going to bring us together. It's going to ensure that we have different perspectives on the table, and we will have more policies and legislations with a human face.
Brenda, that's a good place to conclude our discussion on this episode of Electoral Reform Half Hour. And we wish to thank you, Brenda Anugwom, for your time and huge contributions on the program today. Thank you so very much for joining us. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Excellent. Electoral Reform Half Hour is brought to you by Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa, PAACA, with sponsorship from MacArthur Foundation. We are live every Saturday from 8:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. with a repeat broadcast every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. on same station. Thank you for watching. I am Ezenwawagu.